Ho, ho, ho! Hello, fairy tale friends. It's me, your old pal Santa Claus. I heard that you've been very good this year, so I've asked my friends Tara and Ryan to record a very special episode just for you. So grab your hot cocoa and cozy up by the fire. It's time for Tara and Ryan's Princess Diaries. Ho, 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 ho!
Hello, listeners. Come in and know me better, man.
I love that line.
I know you do.
I love
that's
that
why
character.
That's why I opened with
That's
it.
my favorite character in this. If you haven't guessed, and I'm sure you have because you probably read I don't think anyone just blindly goes like, play on like an episode of a podcast. But we are doing the Muppet Christmas Carol, and I'm now realizing I have no idea what this came out. 93?
1992.
Oh, 92. Okay, close. Let's talk real quick. I know this is a big favorite movie of yours.
Yes.
And I feel like I have recently, I've always liked it, but I've very recently kind of dove into it, and we'll go into why a little later. But what are your memories? What's your story with this movie?
I don't have a memory without it, I guess I should say. I don't mean that like, it just always feels like it's part of the tradition of this time of year. It's one I've always watched. I don't think I saw it in the theater when it came out. Interestingly enough, I'll put one of my facts in here. It did do well at the box office, but it didn't do as well as it could have because it was up against Home Alone 2. So I was reading about that. But
well, it's definitely a Christmas favorite. I've heard a lot of people say it's just not Christmas without this. This is their favorite Christmas movie.
And so that would be the same for me. In high school.
You think this is your favorite Christmas movie?
Oh, see, that's hard for me, but I think it's definitely in my top 3, I would say.
Okay. Well, yeah. I want to know which one's your favorite. You limiting it to top 3 is pretty doable for you.
I have a hard time just doing number 1.
So think about that, and we'll get an answer by the end. But this is definitely a top 3 for you.
Yeah, it's top 3. And in high school, we used to always watch it every year. So we would all gather together. I think we may have exchanged gifts. That night while we watched it or something like that. I'm sure that we did that. I can't remember if we did. I think we did Secret Santas in high school. I don't really remember that piece of it, but we used to always quote this film. And there's one quote that's actually not in the film that has become this running joke with all my friends. And I shared it in the last episode. And there's probably one person who listens, maybe 2 people who listen to this who would get the joke. And they're 2 former guests, and that would be Jeremy and Leanne.
Right.
I think Leanne might be in on that as well. So shout out, Merry Christmas, friends. But it was always, so I don't think it's Tiny Tim. I think it is Tiny Tim, who's rotating the goose. No,
that's the other.
It's the other brother, right?
I always like this because I like this thing when it's I like this version of what kind of children a frog and a pig would have.
Yes.
And not this weird amalgamation.
Not a mix. It's just 2 pigs and 2 frogs.
Do you remember the Great Muppet Caper where Fozzie and Kermit are supposed to be twins?
No, I don't.
The joke is they're identical twins and people keep getting them mixed up.
Oh, that's
And then
fun.
there's a guy who's I remember working with your father, and he cuts to a picture of his father, and his father is Fozzie, who's green with Kermit's bib and Kermit's eyes.
Oh, I love that.
It's so weird. But I like this thing of it's clearly when a pig and a frog, it's weird recessive genes.
Yes.
But when a blonde and a brunette get married, this is you're either a frog or you're a pig. But it comes from the same parents.
So so it's one of the sons is rotating the goose around the spit, and he's like, Mother, the goose.
No, I think Tiny Tim does say it, though. He's not rotating it.
Yes, but it's all during that moment. And we would always quote it, the friends of ours. And then at one point, we all realized that's not in the film anywhere. We just added that in our memory as a direct quote from this movie. And it is not there at all.
See, even with you saying it right now, this has this Mandela effect of me going, I think it is in there. But...
Yeah. So we've always enjoyed it. We've quoted it. I think one year when you and I watched it, I think it was last year, I tracked all the things Rizzo ate, and I will do that this year as well for the podcast. But he eats a plethora of things, and I will just say, this movie, it gives me...
I can remember some of them. Do you want me to try real quick? There's an apple. There's the chestnuts. No. Piggy eats the chestnuts and gets caught. And they're like, Mother! I think he eats... Does he have jelly beans at some point? Anyway, okay, we'll watch it. We'll watch this.
But for me, it gives me all the feels, and I, like, genuinely laugh at it every year. Like, I know the movie inside and out and can probably quote the majority of it, even the quotes we've added don't exist. And it's still one that, like, I will laugh out loud and just, like, have such a great time watching it. And I do feel like once we got together, you had seen it before, but I think it's now become one that you enjoy.
I'm a very Muppet purist, and like I like the 70s Muppet stuff the
and
best,
that's understandable.
Like
completely
the Muppet
get.
movie is my favorite.
Yeah.
It's been a while since I've seen it. I need to see it again, but I don't like Muppets Take Manhattan, and a lot of people put that in that like original trilogy of the 3 good ones. But I remember as a kid, I didn't really like it as much.
Yeah.
So I kind of put the like after Jim Henson passes.
So that's why I think this one is kind of unique, because this is the first film to take place after he passes.
Right.
And so I think that it could still, again, I don't want to argue with what you're saying, but I think out of all of them, this one is still the closest to him in that sense, because he passed in 1990. The film came out in 92.
It's like the kind of like trail off after Walt died, like Jungle Book. And
or like the Jim Henson magic, right? Not to say that like that went away completely, but it's different. So what are do you have any specific memories?
I have a very specific memory, and it's a very vulnerable memory. I see a therapist for anxiety. I don't have a lot of it, but I'm a lot better with it now that I figured out what it was, which we figured out what it was by me dating you and watching The Sopranos and watching Tony Soprano have panic attacks and going, I kind of do that every once in a while. Not really. I just thinking it was me. Like, I think I was just like drilled in my head to term out like, you're just freaking out, or you're just like, quote unquote, whatever.
And until you can like identify it, sometimes I think we think, oh, everybody feels that way sometimes, or I don't really know what this feeling is. And you kind of like push it down. And so like when you can see it, I think film and TV have done a good job of that as of late, showing it more and talking about it. And so, yeah, it's a great way to identify it.
So I'm 11 or 12 when this comes out, and I think we saw it in a theater, or maybe it was the next year and we saw it on TV. I remember seeing it with my family, and I have a very distinct memory of like going into our bathroom and locking the door. And this is also like, our bathroom was a place where I could be very vulnerable, because like it was the only place I could lock the door. Like my mom would just burst into my room and do stuff. So I had
does.
Yes. Like, so I had no boundaries. So if I needed to be alone with my thoughts, it was the bathroom. And there was a lot of, you're spending a lot of time in the bathroom. Anyway, so I'm in there, and I literally am in there, and I start having like an anxiety attack, but I didn't know at the time. I just start crying, and all I can think of to do, it's one of my earliest ones out. I think there's one more I have earlier than that I remember, and I'm like very upset that Tiny Tim, like, even though he doesn't die in the movie, like would have died in the
if things went without Scrooge changing.
The Ghost of Future
if he didn't make any changes
of the Ghost of Christmas Future timeline. And I just went in there and just like sobbed. I remember my dad coming to the door and being like, "Are you okay?" And like really just being like, "I'm really upset about Tiny Tim." And he's like, you know, my dad is not the most like toxic masculinity guy, but like I don't think he had the tools to deal with that. And he was just like, "Oh, I'm sorry." Like he was just like didn't know what to do. And like after I started like going to therapy for things and thinking about this stuff for a couple different things, like looking back, that was when I was like, oh, that's an early anxiety attack I just had over this thing. Granted, that didn't really affect my being, but it was like the earliest memory I have of this movie. And I still think I get a little like choked up when I see, you know, Tiny Tim's like a very, you know, it's, I would say one of the classically like, not relatable, tragic characters that everyone like feels for.
Well, and I did not write this fact down, but I did read that this is one of the only versions that shows him truly sick. A lot of the other versions, they talk about him being sick, but you don't necessarily see him as sick as he is in this one. Yeah, like not only does he have the crutch in this one, but he's coughing and like, and I think
like he's a frail.
Yes, he's frail compared to the other characters, and I don't know that in the other depictions that they do that
right.
as strongly as they do in this one.
I think also kind of going off this because in my head I was thinking, man, we're kicking this off with like a bummer talking about this. One of the things I think is really interesting about this one is it's a lot of fun, but it's also a very genuinely told story.
Mm-hmm.
Did you read the fact about Michael Caine and what he said about how he was going to portray this character?
Yeah, so I have it verbatim because I wanted to read.
Yes,
I wanted to quote him.
Very interesting because I've seen a meme recently where it's like, hey, Michael, it's you and a bunch of Muppets, so have fun. He's like, I'm going to play this as serious as a car accident.
Yeah, so this is, so here's the quote. And the other thing I would like to say, I came across this, Michael Caine, Ryan and I, that was not a good Michael Caine.
It's also not like our thing. It's pretty global like touchstone of how to like, Michael Caine. But Michael Caine sought this role. Oh, I didn't know that.
So he missed an opportunity. I don't exactly know what happened, but to guest star on the Muppet Show from the 70s. And a lot of his friends shared, how much fun they had and how it kind of made them more relatable to children. And I just want to read you the list of those friends. Because one of them is not like the other. And so I just wanted to read this list. Friends that had appeared on the show that told him how much fun it was. Sir Roger Moore, John Cleese, Peter Sellers, Sylvester Stallone.
Sylvester Stallone, okay. So you got to... Sylvester Stallone, like, was where he is now and where he was in.
No. What I'm saying is
the fact that they're friends.
Yes, that's more the issue. Is like it's interesting that they were connected in some way at that time.
They're in movies together, like later in life, like they're friends. But like I think Sylvester Stallone was in like the '70s movie scene because of Rocky and it being this, like,
that to
big
me makes
triumph
sense.
of independent film. Like people don't remember that. Like that was like, oh sure, we'll buy your movie, but we want to put this person in to do this and do this. He's like, no, I want it to be me, and it's gonna. Sorry, that was terrible.
He's right here.
It's gonna be me. Like I want to do it, and I want to star in this, and it became this independent feature, pretty much.
So I just thought it was interesting picturing them as like buds.
Yeah.
But he had his agent like badger and bother Jim Henson Productions until they agreed to meet with him. So he was like very adamant on wanting this role because he missed the opportunity to guest star. So he really wanted to work with the Muppets. And so going back to that quote, before production began, Sir Michael Caine, I guess how we should refer to him.
We'll do our best.
He told the producer and the director, who's Brian Henson. So
Jim
we should
Henson's
mention
son,
that. Jim
yes.
Henson's
this
son.
This is his first movie.
Yes. And at one point on the set,
they told Michael Caine that.
Yeah, they were like halfway through the film, and he was so impressed that this was
shocked.
his first movie that he directed. But this is the quote from Michael Caine. I'm going to play this movie like I'm working with the Royal Shakespeare Company. I will never wink. I will never do anything Muppety. I'm going to play Scrooge as if it is an utterly dramatic role, and there are no puppets around me. And Henson replied, yes, bang on.
Well, it's funny because I found this YouTube video I'll post that's David Goles, who does the voice of Gonzo as well as other characters, and Brian Henson, and they sit down to watch it, and they film them, and they kind of edit together about 12 minutes worth of stories. And Brian Henson was like, it takes a very spectacular type of comedian to understand how funny that is to play it completely straight against these humorous characters. Like, it's not funny for him as a character, but it's creating this amazingly humorous setup, and it's so good. And I think that's a really interesting take on it. Yeah,
I agree. I wanted to talk a little bit just about the movie itself and a couple facts from it here. We said it came out in 1992, 76% on Rotten Tomatoes. And we talked about the director was Jim Henson's son. It is also in memory of not only Jim Henson. It's dedicated to the memory of Jim Henson, but also Richard Hunt. Do you know who he was the voice of?
Oh, originally? He was Beaker.
But he was also the voice of a character that was retired.
Oh, who?
Scooter.
Scooter was retired at the time?
Yeah, I don't know if they brought him back eventually, but he didn't. Scooter did not appear in this film because he had died in 1992 of AIDS complications.
Yes.
And so they retired Scooter. So I don't know if in the later movies, Scooter comes back at all.
He's back now.
He is, yeah. But they retired him in that moment, moment in time because of that.
That's interesting. No, he is a very tragic story, dealing with the whole AIDS crisis and everything. And
yeah, and then Jim Henson was 2 years prior to that. And they performed Statler and Waldorf. They were the voices of both of them as well. So together, that was the two of them. So I wanted to share those facts. I also want to go into the scene that was deleted.
Oh, the song?
Yeah, so the song When Love Is Gone, because I have vivid memories of a child, and I think when you and I would watch it, I was like, there's a whole scene missing. Like, it's a whole scene with a song, and it's on the soundtrack. So reading about it, it was very interesting to find out why it was taken out, where it was taken out of. So I wanted to go into that for anyone else who maybe has the memory of seeing the original that had the scene in it. Mm-hmm. So the song was dropped in theatrical release over objections from the producer and the director. So both Brian Henson and the producer were very upset.
Oh, yeah. But do you know who wanted to drop it?
Yeah, Katzenberg.
Mm-hmm. Boo!
Yeah, boo. He thought it was too sad for young children. It is a sad song. I don't know that it's too sad for young children because this story in general, there's a lot of sad moments in this, in the telling of the Christmas Carol.
What I read was that he said, kids aren't going to want to sit still for this song.
Oh.
And Paul Williams, the composer, when they came to him and were like, I think they're going to cut it, he was like, yeah, but they said the same thing about Rainbow Connection. Like, that was his, that was he said that was his little glimmer of hope that they would keep it.
So it caused kind of a jarring cut. There's this edit when it's cut out of it completely where I think it's Gonzo, Rizzo, and Scrooge are reacting to what they've just seen, which is the song, but the song didn't happen in the theatrical release. So then it was released on VHS, and the first DVD release, they put it back. So that is what I saw, is when it was released there.
Yeah, I've only ever seen it on YouTube clips.
So then it was not used on TV airings. So if you ever saw it on television, it wasn't used. The Blu-ray release that came out later, it was not in that, and it's not on the Netflix or the Disney Plus version. So it's not included there. And apparently in December of 2020, Brian Henson announced that he found the original negatives of the scene and that he would like to reinstate it into the film, hopefully in time for the 30th anniversary, which is next year, 2022. So I am looking forward to seeing if they're going to come out with a special edition with it being 30th anniversary and including it again.
It's also weird because there's a reprise of the song at the end. That's the last song they sing.
Yes, and so it doesn't make as much sense because, I mean, it's fine.
It's fine, but it doesn't have the same emotional weight.
Yes.
Like the scene does because of the story of, A Christmas Carol.
Yes.
One of the things I said earlier was the, more respect I have for this movie. In 2017, there was an article in Vulture called "The Story Behind the Music of the Muppet Christmas Carol," a very clever title. It was about, and this is what I watched, this is what I read that kind of gave me a newfound interest in this movie. Because Paul Williams was a writer. He wrote the music for the Muppet movie. He wrote the music for Emmett Otter's Jug Band Christmas. He wrote music for The Carpenters, Three Dog Night, Barbra Streisand. He was Oscar nominated for Rainbow Connection.
Oh, that song is so
right.
good.
So all of this is at the end of the 70s and the very beginning of the 80s. And then, as he put it, started on a steady diet of vodka and cocaine.
Oof.
And essentially, there's a thing in there he says, when you forget long periods of your life, that's when you know you have a problem. He's like, I don't remember the 80s.
Oh, wow.
He just
that's
coasted
pretty
along.
Significant, yeah.
Yes. And he did stuff in the 80s, so it's interesting. But he basically has a really hard time for 10 years, and they don't talk too much about it because what they talk about is then at the end, when he turns 49, I think at the end of the 80s, he checks himself into rehab, and he checks out in 1990, and 2 months later Jim Henson passes.
Oh gosh, that's tough.
He had actually, the reason they had gotten him on the movie was he hosted an episode of the Muppet Show.
Oh, okay.
And there was a scene they did with Ralph where they did like a song called like a sad song and the piano. And Ralph kind of like pats the piano and says, "It's a sad song." And like Paul reaches down and touches him. And he says, "When I go back and I watch that scene, I realize I am away. I am not reacting. I'm not thinking about a puppet. I'm consoling like my friend Rolf, who's sad in that moment." And he was just
and that's the magic of the Muppets, I think.
Yes, absolutely. So he comes out and he talks a lot about like trying to find a new lease on life, and like he was very looking around and kind of like respecting life and doing this big life change. And so when they came to him, Brian Henson said, "Well, if I'm going to do this movie without without
my dad,
without everything," he's like, I really like the music on the Muppet movie. I'm going to ask Paul Williams." And Paul Williams was like reading it, and he was like, the universe speaks to you in certain ways. And he's like, I really connected to Scrooge, who is looking, the whole story is about him figuring out how to look at life differently. And he's like, that's what I was going through.
It's a redemption story.
Yes, it is a redemption story. And that's a lot of like what he did. He said, there's a lot of songs in there that are just fun songs, but the songs, It Feels Like Christmas and Thankful Heart are like the most personal songs to him. Especially go back. The two that connect with me is the one talking about Scrooge, because he says he thought a lot about like how people felt about Scrooge, and he said he was thinking about like how people felt about him, and he was just like, I'm not gonna change. Like, this is who I am. I'm just this.
Yeah. And that's in the beginning of the film.
That's
when
the
we're
first
introduced to Scrooge.
And then Thankful Heart is Scrooge like being so thankful that his life has turned around.
And that's the end of the film.
And that's what Paul Williams felt. He made this big deal about like, he's like, I look at life differently. And he's like, the whole article, he's like, I'm so thankful for rehab. He's like, this is a gift, and this is this. And he's very much like that. Also the prayer that, Tiny Tim does, Bless Us All.
Yes.
He wrote was a spiritual, not religious invocation that captured Williams' own faith. And then it goes into Williams' own faith, which he goes, I believe in a higher power. I don't know exactly what it is. For me, I refer to it as the big amigo. And it's just like, he talks about it a few times where he's like, I was thinking about this thing and I asked the big amigo, like, what do we do here? Like, I just think that's an interesting way of looking at it, as like, his like, I don't know if it's God, I don't know if it's this, I don't know what it is, but like, there's something there, and this is how I talk to it.
Yeah.
That was after reading that article, and like I think you said, we'll put it up so everyone can read it. It really made me go back and listen to it, and I love these songs now, thinking of it from this, looking at it through this lens.
Yes.
So I encourage you guys to do the same thing when you watch it this time.
Yeah, very much so. It's a great article. I'm actually looking forward to rereading it when you post it again.
I have another story from there that's horrible but wonderful, where he was talking about how he wrote the songs, and then they were talking about Michael Caine, and Michael Caine hadn't sung before. So they were like bringing him in.
He's a little rocky.
He's rough. And Paul was like, well, I'm going to help you. I'm going to walk you through it. He says, I'll help him. I'll walk him through it. And they bring him in. He goes, Michael, I'm so glad you're doing this. It's so great to be working with you for the first time. I've really enjoyed it. Nice to meet you. I'm Paul Williams. And Michael goes, Paul, we spent 2 weekends in London together gambling. And he's like, was it during the 80s? And he's like, yes. He's like, there you go.
Wow. That's
imagine
wild.
Not remembering spending weekends with Michael Caine.
Yeah, that's crazy. Also, something I read about the music, there are 2 more songs on the soundtrack, Room in Your Heart and Chairman of the Board. Room in Your Heart is sung by Dr. Honeydew and Beaker, and Chairman of the Board was sung by Sam Eagle. They were both recorded, but they were dropped from the script to help with the flow of the story. That's why they don't exist.
Neither of those people do I imagine like really like carrying a song.
Yeah.
Like Sam Eagle, I can't like like it doesn't sound. I don't hear him. I don't hear Frank Oz singing as him for a full song.
Yeah. This is also the first Muppet movie where Kermit is not the lead. So this is the first time that there's an example of that. The other thing I wanted to mention about the voice of Kermit, because we've talked about how Jim Henson had passed away, Steve Whitmire, thank you. I was trying to read through my notes and it's kind of scribbled. He tells a story of being so nervous to take over. He was given Kermit, and he was so nervous the night before he was to record all the songs for the film. And apparently he had a dream that night where he meets Jim Henson in a lobby of a hotel. And I think he shares with Jim how he was feeling, and Jim reassured him that the feeling would pass. The feeling of him being anxious and nervous and not knowing if he could live up to Jim Henson's Kermit. And he woke up feeling confident. He woke up that morning feeling confident, went in, recorded the songs, and felt pretty strong about it.
It's interesting to me because I feel like this is one of the better like non-Henson Kermit performances.
Yeah.
And we keep getting further and further away from it, unfortunately. Yeah. Like, one of the things I think that worked really well in the Haunted Mansion is it's Gonzo and Pepe, and those are the original guys still. Like, Pepe's a newer Muppet, but it's still the person who originated it. I don't remember that performer's name, but Dave Goelz is like still alive and still doing it.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and I think the more time that passes, unfortunately, you have less of the original troupe, right? And so then things change that way too.
Well, there's also, and this is a bigger discussion of like how much corporate interest is in there. Like, say what you will about like whether or not you like what Disney is doing right now, it's definitely not nearly as like the small budget weird performance artist that it was in the 70s with the Muppets. So
very much so. I wanted to talk a little bit. I have a lot of things to look out for that I wanted to share, but before I get into that, The Ghost of Christmas Past. This I read a little bit about how they did the effect for this, and so she was created. They made a special puppet of her, and it was used in a tank of water. Yeah. And then it was green screened into the movie. So that's how they get that effect. And I just thought, I think it's still an effect that holds up. I think it looks pretty good. Anytime we rewatch it, I don't know if you came across anything else.
I have a bunch of stuff. I'm going to actually hold off on all my, because it's a bunch of little things. And as we go through the plot afterwards, I'll bring them up then. But I saw the same thing. They had, like, plastic see-through things to operate it underwater. That's cool. They were talking about how like when Scrooge is flying, he's not holding anything because it's not there. It's a very cool effect. I remember like the last time we saw it, I think saying, I feel like they had to do that underwater to get it to float.
Yeah, to get her to flow like that and look like she was floating. We've gushed on Michael Caine a little bit. But he considers Scrooge one of his most memorable roles.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
And I can definitely see that. Also, this was supposed to be a TV special. So originally, I read it was supposed to be a TV special. But there's lots of things to look out for and things that I'm kind of excited to look out for in this viewing of it. One is toward the end of the film, there's a haberdashery. Is that how you say that?
Yeah.
And
see, just confidence, my dear.
There's a haberdashery, and it's called Statler and Waldorf. So look out for that. Another thing to look out for is in the final musical scene, there's a store in the background called Micklewhite. And that's because Michael Caine's name he was born with was Maurice Joseph Micklewhite.
Oh, wow.
So, I was like, wow, what a unique name compared to what his stage name was. Another thing to look out for, in one crowd sequence, there's a lobster hanging out of a basement window. Now, I've not read a lot of Charles Dickens. I don't know if you have.
I've read this.
Okay, but he had a lot of weird turn of phrases. Like, he had some odd, phrases of things. So one of them was, like a bad lobster in a dark cellar. So that specifically is to refer to that. So I thought that was kind of a fun, weird way to like pay tribute to Dickens in this film. Obviously, the whole film is based on his work, but another thing to add in there.
This is not me trying to put you on the spot, but didn't I give this to you for...
You did, and I was just thinking I need to read it now that we're at Christmas
It's short enough
time.
That it's good to read, and it's
also
I've
never read it.
You'll like it because one of the things they do that's very cool in this is like Gonzo's lines, they're just taking them straight out.
Yes.
And that's why they wanted to do it, was to have like his prose, like they wanted him as a storyteller to have like his lines there because like these are just such good lines. But then it's also, they talk about why they put Rizzo, because they thought the idea of having this like Dickensian literature and then a rat next to it going like, yeah, this is weird, like was like a really funny little bit.
Yeah, well, and to go into that, I have a couple more things to look out for, but originally the three ghosts were to be Miss Piggy, Scooter, and Gonzo. So that was originally, and for Gonzo, he would be future. Only his nose would stick out of the dark, the dark hood. But Scooter was absent from the film, as we mentioned earlier. because they retired his character at that time. And so then that's kind of when they changed it. But so originally that's how those characters were going to be used in the film. I think they made a wise decision in how, Miss Piggy is Bob Cratchit's wife. I think that works so well and is such good comedic relief. I think having Gonzo narrate I love Gonzo and Rizzo narrating.
Well, he does such a good job of he's very Gonzo, but then he starts just saying the Dickensian lines and they work real well.
Another thing to look out for, the conclusion of the song One More Sleep. Kermit is in the street alone. So this is when he's walking home.
Is this the shooting star?
Yes.
Oh, is it about the shooting star?
It is about the shooting star. So
I was just using that as a reference because I remember that shot very specifically.
So there's something specific about the shooting star.
Okay.
So he's in the street alone. We see the shooting star. Supposedly in many Muppet movies. So it said not all, but it said many. So I don't know which other ones it includes.
There's one in the Muppet movie.
Yeah. There's a shooting star whenever Kermit's on screen. They do a shooting star. So that was another way of them kind of connecting to the old.
Do you remember it in the Muppet movie where they're all on the side of the road because I guess the car broke down. They're around a campfire and he goes off by himself and he has this talk with himself about how am I going to do this? I have to do this. It's a really good scene.
Yeah.
And then it does a shooting star. I just remember that. Oh.
Yeah.
See, this is why I want to do a Jim Henson.
Oh, I agree. I would love to do it. One last thing to look out for. In the first scene, there's a shop sign called Duncan and Kenworthy. And the producer's name was Duncan Kenworthy. He was one of the creators of Jim Henson's Fraggle Rock songs, a musical history of Fraggle Rock. Which I now...
That I don't know, but I know Fraggle Rock.
Yeah, which I now want to look more into that.
Okay.
So that was a note for us to look into that specifically. During some of the first screenings, this is something I found so fascinating and something I've never put together. But in some of the few screenings that they did, at the end, there were kids, and they asked, what did they do wrong to get coal? Because... he gives them coal for the fire, but kids associate coal with being naughty or bad at Christmas time. And so that's something that I never put that together. I thought it was fun that kids made that connection.
That's
what did
funny.
they do that was wrong to receive coal?
It's because they threw as we learned a few weeks ago, they threw a snowball at the mailman.
I love the bookkeeper's heat wave.
Now, do you know that was almost not in the movie?
No.
They had a long discussion about that joke because they thought it was too goofy.
Oh my god, it's one of my most favorite parts
it's your
of the
favorite
film.
because they talked about it, they go, well, this is
this is my island in the sun.
It's also because it cuts to them and it cuts back and they've got all the they're it's too out of it, and they go, well, we put it in, and then everyone loved it so much that's the reason in Treasure Island the rats, there's that whole subplot of the rats thinking they're on a cruise.
Yes, yeah.
It's
which
directly
I also love.
Because they went, that joke's not going to work, and then the joke works so well.
Well, and we talked about this, I think, in the Haunted Mansion Muppets mini tale, that's what Muppets are known for, the long-running gags that go throughout a story, and I think also jokes that are out there that land and work, right? And do you think that's an example of that or no?
I think I understand them going, I don't think this joke will work. Because, I think Muppets, most of the time, they pull off, one-liners, but this felt a little, I don't want to say avant-garde, but a little meta and strange and almost Looney Tunes-esque. So I understand, I think it worked. I think they pulled it off in a way. It's one of the funniest jokes.
Yes.
But I love them. I just like to hear them having the discussion about it.
Yeah. I like around a table.
Yeah.
So I also read this with the music. I forgot to mention this earlier. There's another verse on Marley and Marley, but it's only on the soundtrack. And so it is, we're Marley and Marley, and now it's time to part, doot doot, to get back where they keep our kind, the wretched and the heartless. The news we've shared has got you scared. We're glad that we got through. So make amends and make some friends. The future's up to you.
That was really good.
Okay, do you want to keep that in there?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Oh, we're 100% keeping it in there, mostly because of the doot doot.
It's in the parentheses.
Does it say doot
doot? Yeah.
I thought you were just
No.
I thought that was a personal touch.
No.
That's really good.
But that's the additional verse. I did my best. That
was really good.
One take Tara. So I thought that was fun that there was another verse in there. And then I only have one last thing, and that is a list of people who are considered for Scrooge, because I thought...
Is it Roger Moore, Peter Sellers, and
not.
Sylvester Stallone?
I kind of wish it was. Let me find the note. Here we go. Oh, did I cut it off? There it is. David Hemmings, Ron Moody, Peter O'Toole, David Warner, and this is the one that stuck out to me, George Carlin. Isn't that a weird one?
I don't know who the first two are off the top of my head.
I don't either, but I thought you might.
I know Peter O'Toole and David Warner, who were like, I'm trying to think what you would know David Warner from. He's in a bunch of Star Trek stuff.
But I thought George Carlin was a weird one, and then I read a fact.
It just feels like this feels like they went, who was big in the 70s? Like, it feels like these are people they would want to get in like prime Muppet heyday.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
And then in 1990, they're like probably trying to reach back and get that magic, because like, you know, George Carlin was such a 70s hippy dippy guy that he seemed like, or in 80s.
Well, and still stayed popular after that, but yeah, when he first...
Yes.
At the height of his popularity. Then I read another fact that said Jack Lemmon wanted to be Scrooge. No, Jack Lemmon was considered for Scrooge, but he wanted to play Kermit. And the producers decided he was out of his mind. and they moved on.
That's probably true.
But I found that interesting that he just confidently was like, oh no, I don't want to play Scrooge, I want to play Kermit.
I do love the idea of like a bunch of humans doing the Muppet story. I don't know why.
Yeah. But that's all of my information.
Well, cool. I was going to save the Heatwave thing for now, but I'm glad it fit in naturally.
Yeah.
But yeah, now this one did come in a clamshell. I very distinctly remember this.
And I had it. I owned the clamshell edition of this.
Well, it's time to open that clamshell up and stick it in the VCR.
See you on the other side, listeners. Hello, listeners. We are back, and as always, this one is delightful. It's so good.
It is. I gotta say something. I like how not like how I like that it's sad in parts. I like that it's just like there's good feelings that bring you through to the end.
Yeah, I agree.
And it's not necessarily just like Christmas is great and blah 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 blah. Now I like a good Christmas is great story, but I think sometimes what's good about Christmas is like, or at least Christmas stories, is the idea that like there's a triumph or something over like things may be bad, but at Christmas we all feel good.
Yes.
Or at least that's the idea of Christmas stories.
We talked a little bit. We touched on that in the Grinch episode a little bit about like conflicting feelings and whatnot. And I think this does a good job of mixing in a lot of those different feelings.
Right.
So I guess we'll just dive in.
Yeah. Now, we've talked about essentially the Christmas Carol story before, because last year, and we'll probably drop it again on actual Christmas, we did Mickey's Christmas Carol. Mm-hmm. So we know that one pretty well, but we'll talk a little bit about specifically this one. Yeah,
we'll talk about what the details, you know, the Muppets are so good with details.
Yes.
And so, you know, this one is that as well.
And it starts with
This one is that as well?
Is that as well? I think that makes sense.
Okay.
And it starts with a shot of the rooftops of London.
Yes.
And that's a miniature shot.
Yes.
That kind of, when it goes down past thing, fades into the actual set.
So I took a note. You said it goes into the actual set right around when executive producer Frank Oz comes on the screen.
Yes.
So that's about when it switches. And it opens with the in memory that we mentioned. And then it also opens with all the characters and who they're playing.
Yes. Now, it's not necessarily actors. It's
Kermit
the Frog as Bob
Cratchit.
Cratchit. But then it's like, and Michael Caine. So that's like the first legit credit in it. Is
Rizzo as himself is the other one.
That one
that's
makes
great.
me laugh, because everyone else is somebody.
And then it's the title of the film. So the title of the film comes during that part as well. We open up on the town, or would we call it a village or a town?
It's London, so I'd call it a city.
A city. Yeah, I guess it is London.
It's
I forgot
it looks
it was
a lot
London.
like it's charming because I don't think they built these huge sets.
Yes,
it's just like
yeah.
2 or 3 stories at most.
So we open up on the people of London, and you were talking about how the pigs in the beginning are improvising.
Yes, that little bit where it's like, oh, that was a good food. What should we do now? Lunch? Like, that was apparently a little improv they did. And according to Dave Goles, they did a lot of improv like that for some of the little, like, chatter and things like that.
And some of that is some of the best lines when you hear those little pieces.
Now, I want to jump to another story that happens right here.
Yes, I have a note to remind you.
The other part that's real funny is, I always forget this, the melon getting stolen. And
yes, he's like,
someone's stealing me.
I'm being stolen.
Because all the food in Muppet movies talks.
Yes.
But then it cuts to, like, people kind of sitting on rooftops.
There's a frog
and awnings.
on the rooftop.
Yes, a very Tiny Tim looking frog, but it's kind of one of the generic frogs.
And a different green. It's
yes.
It's not Kermit green.
Yes, it's a little bluer, I think. Anyway, but during that shot, apparently what you have to remember is there's only a certain amount of Muppet performers. Not only the ones who are doing specific voices, but some of the ones that are just there to like be in the background or like operate background Muppets, etc. So like,
well, and a lot of them do multiple voices of the main one, the main Muppets as well.
But some of them are, so like Dave Goles is up there just doing it for the shots because
he's Gonzo.
He's Gonzo, and he was telling the story that he was laying down in this thing in order to get into the shot because there's a lot of it. There's unfortunately a lot of talk about Muppet performers and all the like back surgeries they all had to have and things like that from being in weird spots. But he was down in there and he said it was like being in a coffin. And then...
Well, and when Ryan says down in there, for us, it's actually up. It's a rooftop that the frog is sitting on.
Well, I don't actually know that that part's up. They could have built that on the ground.
I guess they could have built that on the ground. But it looks, for us, the viewer, it looks like it's up high because it's the rooftop with the gutter that he's kind of sitting on.
So he's laying in it, and they do the shot a couple times, and then they all decide, great, good shot, let's go to lunch. And he goes, and no one came and got me, so God. I'm stuck in there. And I just started being like, hey. And he goes, I learned from horror movies, if you want to freak people out and in a coffin, you bang on the coffin. So eventually someone came and got me. And he's telling this to Brian Henson, the director, who is reacting. I think this is the first time he knew this. He's like, we did? He felt really bad about it. But he's like, oh, yeah, it's the kind of thing you had to do this. Like, he just acted like it was like, I would love to just hear, like, the 20 other stories like that apparently happened to these poor guys.
Yeah.
I think they have to squeeze into these tiny spots to make it look like, so it doesn't look like, just like a puppet show. It doesn't just look like they're behind something big. It's like, so they are in spots that make you go, okay, this is a
Well, and the
character.
Muppets, I feel like, have always been creative with that, even back to the Muppet movie with Kermit in...
on the log in the water?
Yeah, on the log for Rainbow Connection.
Yes.
That is such a magical moment to see that,
Well, there's another scene later where that they talked about where the pigs are all talking about Scrooge after he's, in the Christmas future timeline. I'm saying it like it's a sci-fi movie, in the Christmas future timeline. But he was talking about, he's like, you don't realize this, but like they all have umbrellas. He's like, right under them are all of us. So we're in like rain slickers and all this stuff because we're just getting rained on as we're trying to perform this.
Yeah.
Because we're not worried about keeping us dry. We're worried about keeping
the actual Muppets dry.
Yeah. So.
Oh, that's funny. So we are introduced to Rizzo and Gonzo. We find out Gonzo is Charles Dickens. They're selling apples. And I wrote here, I love how, because Gonzo is the storyteller, he calls everything as it happens. And so he says, and he's going to come around the corner right now.
Yes.
And he does this throughout the whole film. And
I'm a storyteller. I'm omniscient.
Yes. And I almost wrote a note, but then your comment made sense. At the end of the film, they're on a windowsill, and Rizzo says, are we safe to be up here? And Gonzo's like, yeah, what's going to happen? And the window opens, and Scrooge opens the window, and it knocks them off. And I was like, oh, why didn't he see that coming? But then you made a point.
Yes. So, well, there's a couple things there. Number one, like,
I think that's the first thing. And then,
the idea is, and Brian Henson said this, so afterwards when they get knocked down, they run by Bean Bunny, and Bean like looks at them.
And sees them.
And people start interacting with them. Like Bean runs into them and says, "I'm sorry."
Scrooge taps them on the head.
The idea was that the story had caught up to where Charles Dickens was. And he still knows some stuff later, like when he's like, "And Tiny Tim, who did not die." I don't know why I like that reading so much, because it's like, so like, nobody worry, he's fine.
He's fine. He lived a long life.
Yes. It felt like when you see a character die in a movie and I have to tell you how the actor like got up when they said cut.
I know.
And like walked and like went and had craft services, maybe filmed a couple scenes after this. Like when they're fine. No one really died.
Like when I called you during
let's not say what it was, but there was a major
character of a
major TV
show, and it's their ending moment, and I called Ryan sobbing and laughing and crying.
Yes.
Laughing at how absurd it was that I was crying as hard as I was crying because this character had
you just did
died.
it a few days ago with somebody in Bones.
I did with for all our bones.
I'm gonna bleep that out.
Shoot. Yeah, sorry.
So
that's
okay.
a spoiler.
But what I'm saying is, like, you said something with it and you were just like, oh, and like, but your time from when you start crying to when you start laughing because you realize it's a fictional character, as we've gone on in our relationship, has gotten smaller and smaller.
I will say the one for the show that had happened first, where I called you sobbing and laughing, that we referenced earlier here, I've never cried so hard for a character since, ever. Like, that's the hardest I've ever, cried for a fictional character.
It was Breaking Bad. We could say what it was, but we won't say who.
Yeah, but it was pretty bad.
Yes.
But I love all the attention to detail, and that thing that I thought was, why didn't they do that there, fits in with what they wanted
Brian
to go
Henson
for.
said specifically, the story is caught up. They're part of the story that can be seen now.
So the first song we hear, we're meeting Scrooge. It's the song Scrooge. And what we both said we really enjoyed, you don't see his face till the end when he gets to his door. I think that's when you see his face.
I will say one thought I had here is, if you're going to be an actor in a Muppet movie, you better be comfortable with how you look from a low angle.
Yeah,
because I feel like
true.
They film them from these very low angles
they
for
do.
Most of the movie, but specifically this scene, and it's very menacing.
Yes. And it goes really well with the tone that they're setting on who Scrooge is. And we see him firsthand when he comes in with one of his tenants who can't pay their mortgage. And he starts talking, I think, about his daughter and her lungs, and they're not doing well. And so it's already kind of in a dark place where we're really seeing...
I thought this scene played a little more comedic than you're making it, mostly because the Muppet who was doing it was like, please, sir. Like, it's a Muppet. It has a funny voice.
Yeah, but we're seeing how intense Scrooge is, I think, from I love the song Scrooge, but we're seeing how intense he is from moment one. The bookkeepers talk about being cold. This is where the heat wave scene that we talked about comes in. And then this is, listeners, we talked about my history and watching and loving this movie for years and years and years. Scrooge has a gold tooth.
How have we never noticed
this? And this is when I noticed it. They zoom in, and you can see it in other moments of the film. But they zoom in on him. It's when he's sitting at his desk, and it would be his right.
His left.
His left, our right.
Our right, stage right.
It's not the two front teeth, but it's the tooth. I forget what that one's called. The bicuspid, is that right? That's probably not right. I don't know what teeth.
I think bicuspid is a tooth word, but I don't know if that's
the right tooth. But
I'm impressed you pulled bicuspid out of nowhere.
It's the tooth that's in between your front tooth and your canine. So whatever that tooth is. That's
you could probably hear me on the recording going, and like trying to find it with my tongue.
But that's the tooth that's gold, and it shook me because I was like, how have I never noticed that? And it's so prominent. Once you see it, you can't unsee it, and you can see it through the whole film. But I found that an interesting detail. So then his nephew, Fred, shows up. And again, Gonzo knowing he's coming before he comes. And then we started thinking about the word humbug. And I was curious about the origin of humbug. Did Dickens kind of coin this word? Because it's now, is it in the culture? How would you say it?
I would say it was in the cultural vernacular, bah humbug.
Yeah.
And it was a word before this, kind of meant like trick or hoax.
Yeah, mid-18th century, unknown origin, but what Ryan found out was the phrase bah humbug was Dickens.
Yes,
so
that was popularized by Scrooge.
Yes. Rizzo at one point during the scene when they're in the office is used as a bellows. I love that when he's used. to like keep the fire going.
Yes.
Beaker and Bunsen come by. They ask for a charitable donation. Scrooge is very unkind to them. He's not very kind to Fred either. Fred comes with a Christmas wreath, not super kind to them. And Bean Bunny comes singing a carol, basically for money.
Yes.
And he says, a penny for a song. And Scrooge winds up throwing the wreath that Fred gave him at Bunny. So Scrooge wants them to work on Christmas, and the rats, they're so timid at this point. We kind of see how they interact with Scrooge. They get the guts to say something, and then as soon as Scrooge shuts them down, they agree with him. And it happens here again. They encourage Kermit to ask Scrooge to be off on Christmas. And the minute that Scrooge doesn't like the idea, one of them says, "Oh, it was the frog's idea. It wasn't our idea. It was the frog's idea."
I thought you were going to talk about my long talk about like labor practices and the importance of unions at this point, because I was like, he doesn't have to. The only reason we have it off is because of the work of the Labor Party here in America, and blah 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 blah.
Well, the reason that Bob Cratchit gives, which is I think what kind of sways Ebenezer, is, you're going to waste a lot of expensive coal for the fire. It's coal you can save one day, right? So that's what he winds up saying. So he gives them the day off kind of begrudgingly, and then wants them in even earlier on the 26th, and everybody agrees. So then Scrooge leaves, and we get this really sweet scene with Kermit and the rats closing up shop. And Kermit at this point blows out a candle. And I never thought about how it was done. I was like, oh, Kermit's blowing out the candle.
Well, I think we talked about it last year when we watched it. I was like, wow, because I thought the same thing. I was like,
yeah,
we just go, and then Kermit blew out a candle. It's like, he has no breath.
Yes.
And it's just, and it was funny because in the thing I watched, Brian Henson was like, everyone always asks us how we did that. We just had a tube off screen. That was it.
Yeah.
No big trick.
Yeah. So then the next song comes in, One More Sleep Till Christmas. And
Merry Christmas, penguins.
Yeah, Merry Christmas, penguins.
My new one I'm going to start saying to everyone at Christmas.
It's great. But I love how clever the rats clean up, how they get the blinds to go down and how they're putting the books away, because they're so short. So they're doing all these different creative things to clean up. Kermit ice skates with the penguins, and that's when he says, Merry Christmas, penguins. Then Rizzo and Gonzo skate as well. And then this is where it kind of takes it back to that realness, that sadness. We walk by and we see Bean Bunny shivering in the cold with a newspaper.
Yeah, I forgot about
so you
that.
realize, that he's homeless, and probably the donation that Beaker and Bunsen were asking for the homeless potentially would have maybe helped Bean Bunny and others like him in London, I think is kind of maybe what they're trying to connect with there. But as Scrooge goes home, the door knocker turns from a knocker into Jacob Marley's face. And it is kind of a scary moment. And you said that Brian Henson
was a little surprised that kids were scared. He's like, I guess it looks scary, the morphine tech.
Well, and the way he opens his mouth, like the way that they do that.
I remember, I think we talked in the Mickey's Christmas Carol how when he changes in that one to Goofy, that used to scare me as a kid.
Yeah.
It's a chilling scene if you
think about it. Yeah. And the other thing we should mention here, there is a Jacob Marley in the original. There's no Robert.
No, there's no. Yes.
Robert was made because it's Statler and Waldorf.
Yes.
So Scrooge, he's kind of lighting lamps. You can see, is just a very cold, like sad home.
Well,
like there's no real decorations.
He makes that point that he likes darkness because darkness is cheap.
Yeah.
Like I encourage everyone to, if they get a chance, to read the book, because like the really clever twist of turn of phrases in this are usually directly from Dickens' book. Mm-hmm.
And so I wrote here, the music is so good. The music's good throughout, but especially this scene. There's a lot of instrumental. Score. Yeah, the score. The instrumental cues are really great.
Tara and I played trumpet in in marching band, and she played French horn. So we may have talked about this on the show. Whenever there's something with a French horn, she's like, French horn. And I'm like, oh, check out those trumpets. Like, we're always at odds with each other. And then at the beginning of this, they've got this lovely little melody where the French horn and the trumpet are in complete harmony. Yeah. Like, it's just very nice. It was nice to hear that. But the score on this is very good. It is
beautiful.
And some of it is in the soundtrack on like Spotify or the record or whatever.
And I should say, I saw this year, I don't know if this is something that happens every year, but I saw it this year that in some towns, I know it was St. Louis, there were a couple other towns that did the watch along where you could go and watch the symphony.
Yeah.
The symphony would play the score and then you could watch the movie, and they did it for Muppet's Christmas Carol. So I'll be looking out to see if it ever comes our way in Texas.
Now, another thing I want to talk about here is you brought up, we have shown on the Facebook page and in earlier episodes how you do the Calvin and Hobbes decorations for Christmas.
Yes.
We've never seen any Muppet Christmas Carol decorations, and it's something like we've seen that Home Alone house that was down here.
Yeah.
Like people, there's, the leg lamp from A Christmas Story. People do Christmas Vacation stuff. If any of you see any Christmas decorations for that, our Muppet Christmas Carol decorations, please take a picture of it and send it on our Facebook page, our Twitter, our Instagram, wherever.
I have dedicated my Christmas decorations to Calvin and Hobbes, so I don't think that's changing anytime soon. But part of me is like, oh
no,
man, I should have done
changing.
Muppets.
No, the last thing I want is for you to all of a sudden one year go, throw out all this stuff.
Oh, they wouldn't throw them out.
We're doing a Muppet Christmas Carol this year. And then you'll just see like, Ryan, where are you going? And then I just drive off.
But this is when the bell rings, the fire goes out, and the Marleys show up. Mm-hmm. And I wanted you to just explain a little bit, because when the Marley and Marley song happens and we see Statler and Waldorf as them, they are a little bit opaque or see-through. And so I was talking with Ryan, how did they do that? Because it's different than how they did the Ghost of Christmas Past that we talked about earlier. And so you mentioned how that was done.
So Brian Henson, this is how he said it. I don't quite understand it, but maybe someone out there smarter than me or knows this kind of stuff can let us know. But he said they filmed Marley and Marley on a black background, did that whole thing, and then they actually film the Scrooge stuff on the same film, and so it bleaches out the other stuff, it fits perfectly over the black that was the background there, but it makes them seem kind of ghostly. And it's an old film technique from the 30s and 40s, old stuff like that when they used to do this.
But it's a really cool technique to see in Muppet.
Yes.
And so I found that really fascinating.
Well, it's that's why I think the Muppets are so interesting. This and the Ghost of Christmas Present and anything else they do where it's not just, hey, it's someone in a room with a puppet. It's more than that. It's using the tech. There's later when the Ghost of Christmas Future and they walk and the whole screen does that swirly time tunnel thing and they go through it. Mm-hmm. Brian Henson was really funny because he was like, remember how excited we were about this? Because we were like, look at this digital computer effect. Yeah. He's like, now I can do this on my iPhone. He was just like, who cared? But at the time we were like, wow. And they were so impressed by it.
The other thing I was curious about in this scene was who did the voices of Marley and Marley, because Statler and Waldorf were done by Jim Henson and what was his first name? Richard Hunt. And so both of them had passed away. And so Gonzo, the gentleman who does Gonzo,
Dave Goles.
Thank you. Did Waldorf, and the
Jerry Nelson, was that what I told you?
You said whoever did the voice of Robin, who is Tiny Tim. I just don't remember.
Jerry Nelson.
Yes. So
does
he
Robin
did
the Frog, Lou Zealand, Statler, and this one. Ma Bear, and
Fozzie's mom, and
does the Ghost of Christmas Present in this one.
Oh, okay.
One thing I wanted to jump in real quick about Richard Hunt. So you remember how there's the horses that keep showing up. Mm-hmm. So one of them is voiced by Dave Goles, and he decided in his head he named the horse Richmond for Richard, and he apparently kept writing emails as Richmond to Brian Henson to be like, put me in some more scenes, Brian. So when the horses are dancing around for the jail and stuff, that was him
wanting to be in it more.
Going, okay, we'll put you here, and he's like, put me in some more stuff, Brian. And he was
that's really funny.
It's really funny him telling these stories. I'll put this video up, but it was so charming because it's not like it's like if they made a 12-minute director's commentary. It was just cutting through it and as they're watching it.
That's great. So the other thing I wanted to mention here is this is when Marley and Marley lets him know you're going to be haunted by 3 spirits when the bell tolls 1. Mm-hmm. So that kind of sets up the rest of this story. So Scrooge is sleeping. Rizzo and and Gonzo have a grappling hook, and Ryan was like, how did he know to have that? And I said, well, he knows
I didn't say no. How do you know to have it? I go, where did he get that?
Oh, well, that I don't know, but he knew to have it because he knew what was coming in the story.
Like, that was way too big to just be, like, in a pocket. That's what I meant, yes.
He must have hid it in the snow.
That's what I said. I said it was like Bill and Ted. It was like, we'll put a key here, and then just get it.
Mm-hmm. So bright light fills the room, and we meet the ghost of Christmas past, and Scrooge flies with her, and Gonzo lassos basically like Scrooge's legs so they can fly with him, and they fly to the schoolhouse. So now we kind of see Scrooge growing up as a boy, and even as a boy, he's not super pumped for Christmas. He apparently never goes home for Christmas and looks at it as a chance to get extra work done. And in the schoolroom, I don't know that I ever put together, there's a line that must come directly from the Christmas Carol where Dickens says something like, we watch the schoolroom age with decay. And as that happens, then the Shakespeare's bust, the nose falls off, the bookshelf falls. And I don't think I ever connected it with that specific line, like we're watching it age. So I thought that was kind of funny. We then see him at his first job, and this is Fozziwig and the old rubber chicken factory.
Now hold on. You skipped the schoolmaster. I only bring this up because he's one of my favorite Muppets, Sam Eagle.
Yes.
Which I like the lines like, it's the American way. He's like, Sam, it's this story takes place in England. The British way. Like, I just like
good Sam Eagle.
Thank you. Well, I mean, it's just, now I can't do it. But
you did it well.
I love Sam the Eagle. Because all the Muppets are crazy, wild weirdos, and he's so straight-laced. Yes. I love him.
So then we see him at his first job. It's the Christmas party. And I may ruin this for you listeners, and we may have said it in another episode if we ever have talked about the Swedish Chef. But Ryan ruined this for me. The Swedish Chef has human hands, and I cannot unsee it, and it bothers me every time I see him.
Not human-colored hands.
Actual human hands.
They don't put any... You're seeing the puppeteer's actual hands.
Yes.
And I hate it.
And it has ruined it. I've never noticed it until Ryan said it, and now I can't unsee it. I love the Swedish
Chef. But just that one thing, I'm like, oh, God.
Yeah, so he's there at the Christmas party as well. And so are a lot of the other Muppets that you know and love are in this scene. And this is when Scrooge meets the love of his life, Belle. This is the first time they meet. We then see a Christmas Eve years later where Scrooge keeps putting off their wedding. And we find out, it's to manage the business. He seems to always have an excuse as to why they shouldn't get married.
And this is where not your song, but the Love is Lost song is.
Yes.
Because it's called The Love is Found at the end. When Love is Gone.
I knew it was something with when.
Yes, sorry.
That's fine. So that's where that would have been. It would have been there.
And it's also, we said, it didn't feel nearly as bad of a cut as we thought it was going to.
No.
They said in your fact.
They said it was kind of jarring, but it didn't feel that way. It felt appropriate how they all reacted after that scene, because we get the dialogue, we just don't get the song. So now he's back in the bedroom, and Ghost of Christmas Present comes around, and he's the mind of here and now, and he's a bit absent-minded. And is that in the original story, that the Ghost of Christmas Present, he's so in the present, he's kind of forgetful?
Trying to remember. I mean,
because I really liked that detail, and I was just curious if that was.
When you read it, because
I know
of
I
the
am going to
wonderful
read
book,
it. I'm probably going to read it tonight. I should have read it before this. I goofed and didn't put that together.
Oh, it happens. I'm sure we will cover some other version of A Christmas Carol again.
That's true. So then the next song, It Feels Like Christmas, comes. And this is such a boisterous and jolly song, sung by the Ghost of Christmas Present. We get to see the town on Christmas Day. And you had mentioned that the Ghost of Christmas Present was designed after an employee.
Oh, gosh. I need to pull that fact back up. It was just a puppeteer who started work on, like, Return of the Jedi and had been with them a few years.
But I think you should try to do a side-by-side if you can find a side-by-side.
I will. I'll find it.
Or do your own side-by-side. Yeah,
because
for the
listeners. I showed it to Tara, and she was like, "Oh yeah, he looks just like him." And it was just this jolly-looking guy with a beard.
I love the texture of his beard. He has a very cool. The beard has a really cool texture.
A very specific texture.
Yeah. So then we cut to Fred, his nephew. They're at the house, and they're playing a game where, Fred is giving them hints It's kind of like 20 questions. They're asking him,
What do they call it? As soon as they said it, I missed it. And I was like, did you hear them? What the game was called?
No, but it feels like 20 questions.
It
don't
essentially
recall.
is.
Yeah.
It's animal, mineral, vegetable.
Yeah, and then, so we find out it's Scrooge, an unwanted creature. It's
that's
not a
rat, a
cockroach.
leech, or a cockroach.
Yes. And so now we go to visit Bob Cratchit's house, and you can see Scrooge is getting, not so happy, revisiting past memories as well as what's currently going on. And this is where I think we used to say, "It smells wonderful, mother," and it's Peter who says that, and it's actually, "It smells good, mother." So that's another line. And then the goose, I think we put that all as like one line.
I would like to, and this is less about the podcast and more about our lives, put a moratorium on talking about how that line doesn't exist, because I think it's so close to what it is that like we're gonna just say the goose.
Well, and he does.
You do it better. Do the goose.
The
line.
goose, mother. The goose. The goose. But Tiny Tim does talk about the goose when he sits down. He doesn't cough though.
Yes, he does after that. Mother the goose.
Oh yeah. So
We're not moratorium on trying to pick apart exactly what this line is.
Yes, but so it happened. So it makes sense that we kind of grouped it together in high school, but it's funny, it doesn't happen the way that we retell it, which I always love. But Kermit and Robin, or Bob and Tiny Tim, they come kind of singing this cute little a cappella song as they're coming through the street to come home, and you had a fact about that as well.
They're on a barrel in that shot, and you can tell looking at it that the road looks like it's just kind of rotating. In order to get that shot to have them look like they're moving but still be this kind of marionetted bit, it was Brian Henson pointed out as one of his favorite little tricks in it. It looks really good.
It does, yeah. It looks very good. So I also love just the interactions of all the children. You have Bellina and Bettina.
Bellina and Bettina and Peter.
And then Tiny Tim, who comes home. So they have 4 children. And when they give a toast to Scrooge, it's Kermit who gives the toast. And I love how the daughters back Miss Piggy up. She's like, she humps a lot. She's like, And she does, like good riddance. And she doesn't say good riddance, but she's not happy that Bob Cratchit is giving this toast. And I love the daughters kind of echoing her. It's a good comedic bit. And this is also when Scrooge makes a comment on what a meager feast it is. And the Ghost of Christmas Present saying, but it's much appreciated. And then Tiny Tim goes in to bless us all. That's the next song. So then we get to the Ghost of Christmas Future, and you had a story about the fog.
So you see the fog come
because
at Scrooge.
We see Ghost of Christmas Present fades, right?
Yes.
He ages and fades.
Yes.
And then this fog comes in.
This fog comes at him, and Scrooge turns at the last second and runs from it. It's because Brian Henson had said, "I'll say Michael, and you'll know to turn." And he was like, Michael. And like Michael Caine couldn't hear him. And he was like, Michael. And Michael like looked at the last thing. He was like, oh. So if it looks a little rushed, I think it looks good. But
I think it fits, but yeah.
Like he seems genuinely surprised, and it was because he was genuinely surprised.
Yeah. So the Ghost of Christmas Future is very eerie, very creepy. He never talks. He only points. He's so much taller than Michael Caine.
I want to take a second and push my glasses all the way up the bridge of my nose and just say, the Ghost of Christmas yet to come.
Oh, I apologize.
I think I said future earlier, too, so we're both...
Do they say future, though,
I think they might say...
film?
It might be... They say yet to come. When I was looking him up... Because I was trying to see if they reused these Muppets anywhere else.
He is so spooky.
Yeah.
He would be good in like a Halloween something.
Well, because I think you could redo Present and just dress him in different clothes, and he works for other stuff. But that's what I was looking at, like, yet to come and wondering at, like, where else they would use him. So I was looking up the Muppet Wiki. I didn't see anything, but that's when it said yet to come. The internet pushed its glasses way up the bridge of its nose at me.
So then we head to Bob's house, Bob Cratchit's house, and it's so quiet. It's very somber. It's very sad. We see Bob Cratchit's wife, Miss Piggy, is crying. And
it's just funny to hear Bob Cratchit's wife, and then you're like, Miss. So Miss is also not married, and then Piggy is not like, I don't know, the whole thing is just funny. Sorry.
So we see them that they're very upset. We realize that they've lost Tiny Tim. And then Ryan made a point that I never thought about. Bob Cratchit also lost his job because Scrooge is dead.
Yeah.
In this so Scrooge dies the same time that Tiny Tim dies. So a lot has gone wrong.
Well, the other thing,
or is just gone.
Yeah, it's just not
has
a good
not
week
gone
for the
well.
Cratchits.
Yeah, has not gone well for them, I should say.
It's interesting because I wonder if those are supposed to be the same Christmases or if that's just another Christmas sometime in the future.
That's true. Yeah, that I don't know.
Anyway, real quick, sorry, I felt like I was cutting you off, and I apologize for that. But I do want to say, we missed a part where Rizzo and Gonzo go away.
Yes, they go away. They kind of introduce the ghost of Christmas Yet to Come. And then they say,
sorry you're married to such a turd.
This is too, do they say too scary for us?
Yeah, this is too spooky for us.
But
we'll see you
back.
at the end.
And we'll be back,
peace
kids.
Out.
And they peace out.
And I think you're going to say what I was going to say.
It's a good warning for kids that, I thought it's kind of a
It
good
is.
warning to be like, hey, this is a little spooky, but don't worry. Like we'll be back. Everything will be okay.
Yes, that I like, but I also like, we're going to go away, and this is going to get probably the most serious this movie is going to get.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's good for the storytelling, especially right before the redemption, because you need that kind of spooky, like, whatever, to have your spirits be lifted at the end.
Yeah, well, and it really shakes Scrooge, and we see that happen. They talk about how Bob Cratchit, picked a spot on the hill for Tiny Tim to watch the ducks. He always loved the ducks. And then we go to the cemetery, and Ebenezer sees his tombstone and see, it's covered in snow. He wipes it. He's sobbing. He's begging the ghost of Christmas Yet to Come, please, can this be changed? Is there anything I can do? And then the next time we see him, he's in bed. And he wakes up, and he's so joyful to be home. And he opens the window. That's when he knocks Gonzo and Rizzo, they're back. Knocks them off, and he calls down to Bean Bunny, and he sends him to go get the prize turkey. And Ryan has a bone to pick about the prize turkey, but we'll get there. It's not there yet.
I also want to. Well, I guess we're not there yet. Sorry. So he gets dressed, comes out, pats Rizzo and Gonzo.
Well, before that, I love there's one line where Gonzo, because he's still narrating, he goes, and the boy was off like a shot, talking about Bean Bunny, and then Bean Bunny runs through him and Rizzo. And these are the moments we were talking about at the start, where, now everyone is interacting with Gonzo and Rizzo, which they hadn't before. And
so they see Beaker and Bunsen.
Yes, he gives them a charitable donation and whispers the amount, but it's enough to make up for all the back payments he missed. So it's obviously a sizable amount.
Yes. And then Beaker, he gives him his scarf because he's like, I wish we had something to give you in return. And like, you see that moment that really touches Scrooge.
It's probably the first gift he ever got
100
in a long time.
If not the first gift, the one he has gotten that he can remember. And then it goes into Thankful Heart.
Yes.
Which is my favorite song. We were talking about like what you think your favorite song is. This one is my favorite because of the history with Paul Williams.
Yeah.
And re-listening to it from the view of a person who has who has gone through is it rehab? Yeah, gone through rehab, and they've cleaned, they've gotten sober and like looking at the world through renewed joy and new eyes, and I love it. I have some, I think Michael Caine does a passable job through this song until the part where he's singing around the coal. That part is rough.
It is a little rough
when life he's leaving is like a charity.
It's like, when he's leaving the coal for the bookkeepers.
Yes, that part is hard to hear.
Yeah.
However, I love that song, and
it's a good song.
And I even like that it's kind of like spoke sung by him, but I love it.
Well, and now here comes the part where usually I say something heartfelt, and then Ryan comes in with like
a goofball McGillicuddy's.
And for me, I love Marley and Marley. Like, I love all the reasons you listed why this song is your favorite, and it is a really good song. But for me, I think I have to go with Marley and Marley.
I just think, and like, I don't know. I'm not someone, like, I have not gone through any sort of program. I don't find myself to be like a super renewed person, but like that Vulture article really not necessarily spoke to me specifically, but really put the whole show into perspective. And I really have a lot of like admiration for Paul Williams and like respect for that. And like, and again, I'm seeing this through new eyes and being like, this is a very interesting twist on this story.
Yes, very much so. So we also talked about when Ebenezer goes around to everyone. So he goes around to visit everyone, and he's dropping off
From
food
the movie,
and gifts and things like that.
His tenants.
Yeah, and so he
gives them to the schoolmaster and Fozziwig, to which I wanted to point out that old Fozzie is horrifying, much like not as bad as old Gonzo and Haunted Mansion.
Old Gonzo and Haunted
Mansion.
Mansion.
Old Gonzo and Haunted Mansion is bad. But Sam Eagle looks great. He's aged very well. He's a silver fox. I've said it my whole life.
But the other place he goes is to Fred's. And when he goes and drops off food and things to Fred does look a little guilty because Ryan made a good point.
He's thinking up his
game for 20 questions about Scrooge.
Ooh, I got a good one. And then like Scrooge walks in, he's like, oh, gulp.
Yeah. So he then has everyone hide. So basically the whole town, the whole city is following him to Bob Cratchit's house. They all hide. He knocks on the door and he's very stern. And he says, why weren't you at work? And obviously Bob Cratchit is very surprised. And then Miss Piggy comes out, Bob Cratchit's wife, and she just like lets him have it. And I'm determined to raise your salary. She's like, I'm gonna raise you off this pavement. Yes, I wrote that down. It's such a good line. But then Ryan shared that was me, and yes, I have my
Miss Piggy streaks.
I have my moments.
Protective of me.
Yes, when I'm protective of you, for sure. Yeah.
I want to point out, like, I like this scene and I like what happens, but in general, I hate like this idea that Scrooge is like, I've treated Bob terribly for, however many years. Let me get him just one more time with one more little joke.
Jab.
Hey man, how about you start the apologies start now and we'll let you know when you can stop.
Yeah, but he does offer to pay off his mortgage. Not only raise his salary, but the mortgage is like they don't have to worry about that
Here's
anymore.
The thing. Is he paying his mortgage or does Scrooge own the mortgage?
I think it's like
and he's
like
just
you're
good.
Yeah, that's what I think it is.
Yeah,
I think it's probably like
Right.
Yeah, like you no longer have to pay me for the mortgage. Like I'm absorbing that cost, essentially. But then this is where we said, they bring a raw turkey. So it's a chore that Bob's
So now
wife,
someone has to cook the turkey. I'm assuming it's Mrs. Piggy.
Yeah, has to cook that turkey. And now she has a house full of people that she has to clean up
Not just
after.
people, Tara.
The horses are in there. Yeah.
There are animals who are just are Richmond the horse is going to relieve himself right there. I know how horses work.
Yeah, but then when they're all around the table, the turkey is cooked. It's looking golden and delicious on the table. They do,
but that's not a small amount of time.
No, but they do a.
They've been there a while.
Yes, they do a reprise of the love song, but it's now The Love We've Found.
Yes,
and so that's how the film ends, and it's wonderful.
I love it. I love it more and more every year. I'm telling you, read this article. It really, hopefully, like what we've described has helped bump this up in your estimation of it.
If you didn't already love it.
Right. Let's do our questions. Mm-hmm. How was the prince, Scrooge? Because here's another thing. We're not going to rank a villain in this. I don't think.
Really...
Scrooge is the closest thing to a villain, but it's such a redemptive story that I don't think it would do well for him as a villain. He's also the focus of... Yeah, he's a protagonist. He's the prince. Yeah, so I really liked Michael Caine as Scrooge. That, he has a couple moments with his singing, but other than that, it's a great performance. I think it's a fantastic performance, and apparently he loves this movie, too. Well, and he loves the Muppets. We found facts, we found things of him, seeking this role out, and you can just tell, that he was all in. You could tell he was all in to play this role, and I think it shows. Who do you think the princess was? Is it Kermit? I think so. Okay. I like Kermit in this. We talked a little bit about his voice. And there are spots where I go, that's not Jim Henson. But, it's pretty good. Yeah. And again, I think it's such a huge undertaking because this is 2 years after Jim has passed. So it is the first big production that they've done without Jim Henson kind of leading the way. And Kermit's an icon. Yes. An icon. Yeah. What are the other questions? I was like, I'm doing it from memory. How are the henchmen sidekicks? I'm going to put that mostly on just the other Muppets, but Rizzo and Gonzo were fantastic. They're two of my favorites. It's the only thing about Haunted Mansion that kind of bums me out is that I don't think the guy who does Rizzo is still... I don't know what the story is because I feel like I don't see Rizzo much in the Muppets anymore. And that it being Pepe and Gonzo, but Gonzo and Rizzo is such a good match, and they're in it. Like, don't they follow them around in Muppet Treasure Island? Like, they become like kind of the pairing for a while.
I think so. Yeah.
We'll find out because spoiler, guys. Around the time of Treasure Planet, we'll be also doing a mini tale on Muppet Treasure Island.
So excited.
So how does it hold up?
I think it holds up well because it is a traditional story that is told this time of year every year.
Yes.
Right? So in that regard, it's taking place, it is a period piece.
Yes.
Because it's taking place during, when Dickens wrote A Christmas Carol. But I think in the same way it's timeless, even though it's a period piece, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, the things of like female character agency, like that's the Christmas story. I don't think they really do a lot with that.
Yeah.
And then like ethnic representation or, minority representation it's a Dickens thing and made in 1993. Like, you're not going to see a lot. Like, we're now starting to see.
Was the Muppets cast diverse, though? The puppeteers?
No. From the 70s, typically not. I do feel like the puppeteers now more and more are.
Okay.
I think this is around the time. For a long time, it was a very male-dominated field. It probably still is. I don't know a lot about the field of puppeteering. But, Jim Henson was also very, like, liberal-minded. And, like, they had, like, a very big... The Harry Belafonte episode of The Muppet Show was very famous for its depictions of African culture and things like that. Mm-hmm. And he tried to do a lot of that stuff. But it was also, like... There's always the talk of the performative liberal like version of representation, which is better than a lot of things, but isn't the same as letting those voices have their own, tell their own stories. Mm-hmm. So I kind of, it's kind of crummy for me as a white male to be like, I give it a pass, but like, I understand a little bit why that's the case here.
I will say I do like that one of the ghosts was a woman. She was a child, but she was. I like that there's a little bit of diversity there, right? Whereas instead of it being three male ghosts,
see if it's a woman in the story. I mean, no, not right now. Like when you read it. Sorry.
Okay.
You reach for your phone.
Okay.
I didn't mean to give you an assignment.
Yeah.
So there's that. So finally, this is the easiest. I feel like this is a very easy question. On our shelf.
Oh, 100%.
Yes,
it
100%.
is. I think we do own it, don't we?
I don't think we do because I think it's so easily streaming.
Oh, well, I will be buying it for the 30th anniversary.
I think when we didn't have Disney Plus, it was on Netflix. So
yes, so we were able to find it there. Yeah.
So yeah, that's it, guys. I hope you've really enjoyed our month-long holiday celebration.
A December to remember.
We sound like a Honda dealership. But I do want to say one thing about this. These 4 movies have all been Christmas movies, and we understand that there are lots of other holidays to celebrate around this time of year. I personally just maybe don't know a lot of good specials for those holidays that we could watch. So next year, our call out to our fans for, you can do it right now. We'll put it on the docket for next year, or even throughout the year. If, you celebrate something around this time that's not Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, anything else I'm not thinking of, winter solstice, whatever, please let us know some sort of animated, stop motion animated puppet, like anything special that we can watch to kind of add to our collection and do it next year. And, hopefully kind of be a little more representative of that. I hope you enjoyed our 4 Christmas ones this year. I had a blast doing it. If you got any recommendations, like we said, give us a call, 707-YO-TRPD1. Leave us an email, anything like that. Always remember to rate, review, subscribe, and tell someone about our little podcast. Whatever you celebrate, be it Christmas or anything else, have a happy holidays. Anything else I need to say to cover all my bases?
You got it.
Well, thanks, guys. We'll see you next time.
Happy holidays, listeners, and you'll hear us in the new year.
Well, children, I hope you've all enjoyed this episode. I know I did. Now, if you want to let Tara and Ryan know what you want next year for Christmas, you can send them an email at trprincessdiaries@gmail.com or call them on the very easy-to-remember hotline, 707-YO-TRPD1. That's 707-968-7731. If you want to stay off the naughty list, please give this podcast a 5-star review on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Podbean.com, or wherever you hear it. Stay safe and be good, everyone. Happy holidays to all, and to all a good night.